तुलसीदास कह रहे हैं कि मनसबदार बनने से अच्छा है कि राम का ग़ुलाम रहे, तो मुझे दो किस्से याद आ गए। एक किस्सा ये है कि जब बादशाह अकबर सूरदास के पास गए, पहले तो उन्होंने बहुत बुलाया लेकिन सूरदास ने आने से मना कर दिया। फाइनली बादशाह अकबर जो हैं वो सूरदास के पास खुद पहुँचे और उन्होंने कहा कि आप जो मांगना चाहते हैं मांगिए, आपको मिलेगा। तो सूरदास ने कहा मेरी एक ही विनती है, अब आप दोबारा कभी मुझसे संपर्क नहीं कीजिएगा। और उसी तरह एक और मुझे मशहूर किस्सा याद आया निज़ामुद्दीन औलिया का। और आप सब जानते होंगे कि निज़ामुद्दीन औलिया के वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट डिसाइपल was perhaps one of the greatest Sufi poets, Amir Khusro. So one of the Delhi Sultanate Sultans said he wants to visit Nizamuddin Aulia and he wants to meet him. So Nizamuddin Aulia and Amir Khusro was the one who would go to the courts because he had court patronage. तो अमीर खुसरो को के हाथी पैगाम पहुँचाया गया, तो अमीर खुसरो ने कहा से निज़ामुद्दीन औलिया ने कहा कि बादशाह एक दरवाजे से अंदर आएंगे, मैं दूसरे दरवाजे से बाहर निकल जाऊँगा। So here is some poetry by Rahim, the great mystic poet, और हमारे बड़े अजीज़ दोस्त मुस्तनसर दलवी साहब ने इसको translate किया है. So I will read out the translations to you. All around us clouds burst, yet with every drop, sister, this parched body aches and craves for Krishna. What if Ram had not chased the deer and Sita not been abducted by Ravan? There is nothing to be got out of this Rahim. What is to be, shall be. The alley is narrow, Rahim, not wide enough for two bestride. If your ego persists, there is no hurry. Where hurry is present, there is no ego. Well, Rahim, what was Hari thinking, stretching my heartstring to the full? He pulled me taut towards him first, then wantonly let go. Just calling a large thing small, Rahim, does not diminish its size. Krishna, who lifted the vast Mount Govardhan, won't take it amiss if called Murlidhar. That which smolders burns itself out. This is for the children who's been forced to come here and sit here. It's most important for you to pay attention because when we were young, we were also forced and we felt it was a waste of time. But today, I think it's benefiting us very majorly. That which smolders burns itself, the extinguished can never reignite. Those in love will blaze again, Rahim, each time you snuff them out. Thank you.
Well done. It's a tough act to follow because Danish is an actor and I'm a humble poet and translator. So, but what I think is really important is that Bhakti is a conversation. So my mental image of Bhakti is actually, if this is God, I'm actually standing here chatting to God. You know, I'm telling him what's in my heart and he's listening with a half-amused smile on his face. So in continuation of that conversation, taking from Arundhati's and Mr. Vajpayee's beautiful introductory remarks and going on to what Danish said, I want to start with a poem that has always been so close to me, and I think it broke me out of my Roman Catholic shell when I read it the first time in an A.K. Ramanujan. Okay, I have to keep reminding myself how to pronounce the name. The Ramanujan collection. It is, if they see breasts and long hair coming, they call it woman. If they see whiskers and muscles, they call it man. But look, the self that hovers in between is neither woman nor man, O Ramanatha. And invoking Ramanujan, I'm so glad that Arshia Sattar is with us today. Because in some ways, for me, whenever I see her, it's wonderful that, you know, Ramanujan's Bhakta is a Muslim woman who lives in Bangalore and runs something very appropriately called Sangam House. Because if anything, the other thing that Bhakti is a Sangam, a constantly evolving Sangam. And so this is in response to that lovely story you told about Surdas. This is Dasi Maiya in H.S. Shiva Prakash's translation. To the gift of elephants, I will say no. To the gift of a huge fortune, I will say no. To the gift of a vast empire, I will say no. But to the gift of the wise sayings of your devotees, just for a moment, I will give even you away, O Ramanatha. Oh, that's really, that feeling that for this event, for this Sangam of all of you, of Indira and Arundhati and Vajpayee and Mani and Danish and Arshia and in that humble, sad little way, Jerry Pinto as well, all of us together, Dasi Maiya would give away his Ramanatha. We've got something to hold on to here. A lovely and beautiful moment. Thank you all so much. And Indira, please come.
I just want to add, if Jerry Pinto is the Bhakt, who would not like to be the God? Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. With that, we are ready for the next session. May I request all the delegates who are still outside to please come back to the seats. Ensure that your mobile phones are switched off. And we are ready for a very interesting, stimulating conversation between two scholars. And they will be throwing lights on early stirrings of Bhakti in Tamil Shaiva poetry. Dr. Indira Vishwanathan Peterson is a professor of Asian Studies, Emerita at Mount Holyoke College, USA. She specializes in Sanskrit and Tamil literature, Hinduism, South Indian cultural history, music and dance, and Europe-India culture contact. Her publications include poems to Shiva, the hymns of the Tamil saints, a translation of the Bhakti poems of Tamil Shaiva Nayanar, Arjuna and the Hunter, a translation of the Sanskrit classical poet Kirtar Yunia of Bharavi, the great temple at Tanjavur, 1,000 years, 2010 with George Michel, and performing pasts, reinventing the arts in modern South India. Mani Rao is a poet, translator, and scholar. She has 9 books of poetry, including new and selected poems, Poetry Wala, 2 books in translation, Bhagavad Gita as a poem, and Kalidasa for the 21st century reader. Her latest book, Living Mantra, Mantra, Deity, and Visionary Experience Today, is an anthropology of mantra experience among Hindu tantric practitioners in Andhra, Telangana. She has an MFA in creative writing from UNLV and a PhD in religious studies from Duke University. She has held residencies at Omi Ledig House 2018, Lowa IWP 2005 and 2009, and was the 2006 University of Lowa International Programs Writer in Residence. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is O Madman, God of Grace, early stirrings of Bhakti in Tamil Shaiva poetry. Dr. Indira Vishwanathan Peterson in conversation with Mani Rao. Please put your hands together for Dr. Indira Vishwanathan Peterson and Mani Rao.
Is it on?
Is this on? Yeah.
Can you hear me? All right, good.
Does this work too? Yeah, okay.
Good.
Welcome everyone, and I'm very honored to be in conversation with Indira for the next 50 minutes, but we'll make it 45 minutes.
Sure.
Catch up on a few minutes. I would say that every session in the schedule seems like an interruption, actually, an interruption and a program of dissent. So I'm very happy that the tone was set by Ashok Vajpayee and Arundhati. talking about sort of rebellion. And also very glad that you mentioned the colony of Rama and Krishna. And in the next 45 minutes, we shall decolonize and move away from Ram and Krishna and away from the Tulsidas and Surdas and all the names in the north that we are, I think, actually overly familiar with, if I may say so, and move a little south of a particular spot. And that spot apparently is a train station. I remember when I was younger, I was told that when you're traveling in a train from the south to the north, one particular station comes where you change from coffee to chai. And there's a divide between these parts of India. And we are going to take you in the next 45 minutes south of that point to Tamil Shaiva movement from the 5th century. So what you said about perhaps for the first time in Indian tradition also we are going to dissent with, because we are going centuries back to the 5th century. And Indira is the author of this amazing work. It's called Poems to Shiva. It's a book that I actually studied in university and was very impressed by. So I'm very honored to be in conversation with her. I shall open by asking her basically about how she came to do this pretty monumental work. I've read about how she lived in Mylapore and went to temples, and she went to temples, the Kapalishwara temple and so on. And can you give us a little context and background of how did you discover this movement and get into this?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Mani. And first, let me say how delighted I am to be speaking with a poet and a scholar of Sanskrit and a translator, because these are all things dear to me. I'm primarily trained as a Sanskritist, so that's part of the journey I'm going to describe. So I think it's very appropriate that you are the one who's speaking with me, and your question is wonderful. I think I will simply begin by reading the first words I wrote in this book in my preface. As a child, I lived for a year with my grandmother in Mylapore, the old quarter of the city of Madras. The house was located on one of the 4 streets which form the square enclosing the ancient temple of Shiva, Kapalishwara. In that year and in that place began my acquaintance with the Tevaram, the hymns of the... Tevaram literally means the poems for God in worship. And that's a very interesting question, because recently we talked about, Ashok Vajpayee in particular talked about the discarding of ritual, but here the ritual of worship, not just by priests, but the personal worship of Shiva through the ritual becomes the center of the cult. In any case, in that year and that place began my acquaintance with the Tevaram, the hymns of the 3 Tamil Shaiva poet saints. Every evening at the temple, I heard the clear, sweet voice of the hymn singer rise in song above the voices of the devotees and all the din that you experience in any South Indian temple worshipping at the shrine. The words were in Tamil, my mother tongue. They spoke eloquently of deep emotion, of sacred places, of God in beautiful landscapes. I was enchanted. In 1978 and 79, I returned to Tamil Nadu to study the performance and cultural milieu of these texts as groundwork to a translation of the hymns. So let me say something about why I wanted to translate them. That's interesting too. I grew up in Mumbai, and I, of course, spoke Tamil at home because we were Tamilians, but none of my family read any Tamil except to read the newspapers. So nobody knew anything about the Tevaram or, Tamil Shaiva hymns. But we often went to what was then Madras and to my grandmother's place, and there everybody not only spoke Tamil, but as Mr. Vajpayee and Arundhati pointed out, everybody on the street could sing these hymns, and not only at the temple. So I was particularly just taken with this, and then I said, I must learn about this. There's another side to this also, the fact that they were music. That was very important to me. That, if I can just say one couple of things, I was always drawn to music, and I sang Hindi, Marathi, and so on. So I wanted, and I was trained in Carnatic music, which is in Telugu and other Sanskrit and other languages. So when I heard these beautiful hymns, I wanted to find out what they were. And then to finish, why did I want to translate them? I got a job teaching undergraduates literature, Indian literature. And of course, the first thing I wanted to teach was Bhakti, because as it has been pointed out, it is universally important. And how can you talk about India without talking about Bhakti? And I could teach Surdas, I could teach Kabir in English, but I could not teach any Tamil poetry in English except for Ramanujan's translations of the Kannada Veera Shaiva Vachanas. And I said, where is Tamil? So I said, well, somebody's got to do it. I can't teach my students, I can't talk to them about my passion unless I translate them. So that's the answer.
That's fascinating. Thank you. So my question is, she took 30 years to work on this project. That's such a long and deep engagement. And you talked about just now about how you went to your grandparents' home and visited these temples.
Yes.
My question is, this is actually a body of work from the 5th century, that is like 15 centuries before, and still it seems to have a rather pervasive status in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah.
Do you think you could tell us a little bit about
Sure.
what kind of status does it have? How come it's so sort of is it institutionalized? What is the status of Tevaram?
Yes, that's a very important question because I discovered this for myself. I mean, I saw it and I heard it everywhere, and I heard it in the temples. And then when I started delving into it as a cultural historian, I found how institutionalized it has been and it became. But I also wanted to say something about the journeys, going to the temples. I only spent about 5 or 6 years doing that back in the 70s and 80s, but there are over 260, I'll show some images in just a minute, but I don't want to distract now, but more than 260 temples dating from the Pallava and Chola periods, which means something like the 6th to the 12th, 13th centuries, which were then made bigger, and some of them, like Madurai Meenakshi Temple, these are all founded very, very early, Kanchipuram, Ekamranatha. But these temples, I actually jumped from bus to bus and took bullock carts and things and went there, and I found this living tradition in the villages and not just in Chennai. So coming back to why it is so important, that was your question. I think I would like to, do I just point this over there? Where are they being shown?
Who is the technical person here?
Yeah, the technical person, which button do I press? He just brought this to me. Could you just tell me which button to... Okay, it's doing it, right? It's showing, okay. All right, so you can see this area here. You can see a little bit. Yeah, very quickly, I'm not going to give a lecture here. Just basically the Kaveri Delta, which was the greatest cradle of civilization, more or less, with the Sangam period, the 1st and 2nd centuries, and then the up to the Chola Empire. This was the heartland of the Tamil region. Like the Ganga, the Kaveri is the great river of Tamil Nadu, and it is more than 270 shrines in this one area alone, although there are more in all the other plots, but this is very thickly strewn with temples, so you can pretty much walk in one day from one temple to another, and that's what I did. But that is what these 3 saints did, who were the authors of the Tevaram. Their names are Appar, the father, Sundarar, I should start chronologically. Appar, the father, the old man, Thirunavukarashar, Lord of the tongue, of the master of the tongue, master of speech. And the second is Sambandar, the child, he who related to God through his divine wisdom. And the third is Sundaramurti, the handsome one. Also, he struck exactly the attitude that Jerry Pinto struck towards God, which is that he was the Lord's comrade in arms. So these 3 very interesting saints who lived in the 6th to the 8th centuries composed, and I won't say wrote, because they composed and sang, divinely inspired these Bhakti songs, and these were the very first Bhakti songs, other than Karaikal Ammayar, who was the older, I shouldn't say they're the very first Bhakti because there were also Vaishnava poets at the same time. These are the first Shaiva Bhakti songs, along with the ancient lady, Karaikal Ammayar, who's shown as a kind of wizened old woman with hanging breasts and so on. Very interesting poet. But her songs didn't become quite as institutionalized as these were, and there were many reasons for that. One reason is this. First, that they were connected closely to temple worship. The agamas, which were becoming very powerful, puja, which was replacing Vedic recitation and Sanskrit alone, so that these Tamil hymns, this vernacular coming into its own, but it's not just a vernacular. Tamil has a classical tradition going back to the 1st century. So these poets like Tulsidas were well versed in Sanskrit and Tamil, and they went back to this tradition and they put it in the local language, in the spoken language, and that language is still intelligible to us today. This is the point. It's not entirely intelligible, but close enough. Yeah.
Before we go deeper into the context, do you think you could share some examples of these songs of what the Nayanars wrote? So that actually gives us a bit more of the
otherwise
flavor.
You won't know. Let me just show a couple of images. So there is Sambandar, and I'm going to read. This is the one I'm going to read. Before that, I want to say one of the poems of Appar, the old man, the father, one of the poems begins like this. Flowers make ornaments, and so does gold. Yet if our Lord, who sweetly abides in Arur, were to desire an ornament for himself, simple heart, let us honor him with the ornament of Tamil song. Two things are important here, Tamil and song. The song and the Tamil become the puja for the god. So these songs then became institutionalized because they were seen as more important than even the actual mantras and so on. And in fact, they are the embodiments both of the Vedic mantras, the agamic puja ritual, and so on. Here is Sambandar, his hand raised up. One hand is raised up like that. The other hand holds the cup. The cup, the story goes, was a cup that the goddess Parvati gave to him, appearing to him in a vision with Shiva. And the god Shiva asked her to give the milk from her breast to this little child who was crying at the temple tank. And she gave it to him, and immediately he sang this song. His father came. His father was a Brahmin, a priest, and he said, "Who gave you this milk? How dare you drink something that someone else gave you? This is polluted." And immediately this is what he sang. And I'm going to sing it for you, just in the way it has been sung since at least the 11th or 10th century. I need a Shruti here. 1 second, please, while I fix it. Here it is.
So this is not Appar. This is
Sambandar. Yeah. They were contemporaries. He was much younger, so he was the child. Appar was the father. Todudaya. I think I'll pitch it a little higher. It's a little too low for me. Todudaya. No, I'm sorry. The pitch is not. Sorry, excuse me for a moment. I think I'll go back to that pitch, or just not have any pitch. Todudaya seviyan vidayeri votu vanmadi shudi kadudaya shudalai podi pushiyan ullau kavarkal edudaya malaran munanat paninde tavarul sheida Pidudaya Pirama Puramevia Pemmanivanan Re. In translation, would you like to read the translation? Yeah. Okay. He wears a woman's earring on one ear. Riding on his bull, crowned with a pure white crescent moon, his body smeared with ash from the burning ground, he is the thief who stole my heart. This was his answer to the father. He wears a woman's earring on one ear, riding on his bull crowned with a pure white crescent moon, his body smeared with ash from the burning ground. He is the thief who stole my heart, Ullang Kavar Kalvan. He's the Lord who lives in fine Brahmapuram, where he once blessed with grace Brahma of the lotus seat who worshipped him. Now, the elements of this poem are three. One is the beauty of the Lord. He wears a woman's earring on one ear, and you'll see in every image of Shiva, one earring is dangling, a large one, and that's the woman's earring. It's on the left side. And the other one, because he's one who is both woman and man, half woman, right? And then he rides on his bull, you know the rest of it, but he's the thief who stole my heart. This is the important thing. It's that intimacy of relationship, that distant God who is so awesome and who appeared to him in this vision is the God that he loves. And the last thing is, he lives right here in Brahmapuram, and this is where I live, and in this temple where once he came and gave his grace to Brahma, the creator God. These are the three elements of Tamil Shaiva poetry, and this very first poem begins.
Is this that the response to the milk question?
Yeah, it's the response to the milk question, and then it goes on again. There's further. There are 10 verses in each hymn. This is the first verse. Then he explains more about the goddess, but it's not really a response and answer. The idea is that this is what he was possessed. I mean, he had drunk the milk of wisdom. He was related to God, and he was telling his father, the mother has given me milk, and he's also my father, and here I am, and this is my relationship.
So this is the adult Samandar
No, this is
talking
the baby.
about himself as a baby, or
No, this is the child. This is, you see him
Okay, I
in
just
the
want
image. It's
that
the
to
child
be
on the
communicated,
cover.
yeah.
You know, he's completely, the child is pointing up with a cup in his hand. He's appearing with a cup, and he's saying, he's singing this. But I want to say one other thing. Ramanujan once translated a poem which was from the early Sangam love poetry. The love part, it begins like this. Only the thief was there, no one else. And if he should lie, what can I do? And the second part of the poem is important because I'll come back to that. There was only a thin-legged heron standing on legs yellow as millet stalks and looking for lampreys in the running water when he took me. So this is the taking. This is an embrace. This is a possession. This is a union. That moment is being described here in the terms of the classical love poetry of love between a hero and a heroine and a man and a woman. So his father, mother, everything that we talked about.
This is brilliant. I mean, can you just talk for another 20 minutes and give us like
Sure.
a few
Yeah.
more songs
Yeah.
and poems?
Yeah. All right. Now
this is totally enjoyable.
It'll
Yeah,
just
please.
be poems now. So I'll read one more poem, which is, again, it is Appar, who pretty much summarized what Tamil Bhakti is all about. முன்னம் அவனுடைய நாமமும் கேட்டாள் மூர்த்தி அவனிருக்கும் வண்ணமும் கேட்டாள். I'll just read this quickly. பின்னை அவனுடைய ஆரூர் கேட்டாள் பெயர்த்தும் அவனுக்கே பிச்சியானாள் அன்னையும் அத்தனையும் அன்றே நீத்தாள் அகலிடத்தார் ஆச்சாரத்தை தன்னை மறந்தாள் தன் நாமமும் கெட்டாள் தலைப்பட்டாள் நங்கை தலைவன் தாளே. Once she heard his name, then she learned of his lovely form, then she learned of his excellent town. She fell madly in love with him. That same day she left her mother and father and the proper ways of the world, lost herself, lost her good name. This woman has joined the feet of the Lord, her lover. This summarizes it. Tat mat bandhu brat apna na koi chhad gayi कुल की कहानी क्या करेगा कोई मेरे तो गिरिधर गोपाल. Meera speaks several centuries later.
It's like an anachronism, like you're giving a reference from centuries later. It's beautiful.
No, I'm just
Yeah,
saying
no,
that
I
we
understand.
want to go
It's
back.
beautiful,
Yeah.
But the poem is talking about a woman. So who is the
Yeah,
poet?
it's an allegory. Appar
Okay.
wrote this
It's Appar
poem,
writing that.
and he is himself, he's the bhakta, he's the bhaktini, he's everybody, he's we all,
That's
but
beautiful.
he's the woman. This is what's beautiful.
Yeah.
And here is Sundaramurti, the madman of Arundhati's title choice. O madman with moon-crowned hair, God of grace, O Lord, how can I forget you? You dwell forever in my heart, in Arulturai shrine of grace, In Vennai Nallur on Pennai's southern bank, you took me for your own. How can I deny you now? I won't tell you the whole story of Sundaramurti, but he was going to get married. I forget what exactly he was doing, but Shiva gave him a deed of contract. He came as an old man and said, "You are my slave. You've been my slave for 7 generations, and you will be my slave." And Sundara said, "Who are you? You know, I'm a rich man, and why should I be your slave?" And Shiva said, "You don't know it, but you are." And then Sundara's answer is, "I am your slave. Oh, madman. Oh, you stupid madman."
What was the word there for slave in Tamil?
Pitta pirai shudi pitta pittan pitta pirai shudi perumane arulala. O God of grace, ettan maravade ullathil une. Anyway, we shouldn't linger on this. I want to continue with this. Let me just get to. I just read poem after poem and keep talking about it. There's something
Can you
about.
maybe
Yeah.
give us
Sure.
a little bit of the emotional
Yes,
flavor?
that's what
Yeah.
I'm getting to. But first, I wanted to set the poets' lives, and then, okay. Here's every emotion, the spectrum, entire spectrum of emotion we talked about earlier with Jerry and all of us, Danesh and Ashok and Arundhati. It's all here. Let's begin with Appar. I can't sing like a true devotee. O God, great yogi, how can I worship you? Do not spurn me, perfect being, primal Lord, Father who dances in Thillai's Ambalam hall. I, your servant, have come to see you dance. Seeing your dance, I will praise you. Singing and dancing, I will hail you, crying, O Lord, first among the three. What shall I do, O God, with a dark throat, if my mind is confused and daily slips from the highest path? I, your servant, have come to see all your dances in the little Ambalam in Thillai. Having failed to purify my heart and to make me meditate on you as I should, have you not deceived me, O Lord of the immortals? And yet, handsome one, you dance as the soft-spoken lady watches in the little hall in Thillai, town of cloud-kissed groves. I'll read a couple of others where this emotional aspect. Can we push this a little further so the papers don't? Here's another mood, you know. One is very, this intimacy, this immediacy of bhakti is shown not only by the poet to God, but he invokes the entire community of devotees of Shiva to join him in this worship. Dance, lovers of Shiva, become devotees of the Lord. Crown yourselves with dust from his feet. Give up worldly life, not asceticism, but love of Shiva. End your suffering. O devotees, gather together. Go straight to Manni Padikarai and sing of his place. O devotees who have joined our group out of love, dance, weep, worship him, sing his feet. Gather at Kurangadu place of his Lord. I want to make one comment here. Every poem will have the name of the particular place. You know, it is true all over India that people always ask you, where are you from? Aap kahan se? Kahan ke hain? But in Tamil Nadu, that's what you put before your name. In fact, when you hear of any South Indian musician, Lalgudi Jayaraman is a famous violinist. Nobody calls him Jayaraman, they call him Lalgudi. Lalgudi is the name of his little village in Tanjavur, but that's what they call him. So I would, in my grandfather's time, I would have been Shivaganga. I wouldn't have been Indira or Vishwanathan or Peterson. I would have been Shivaganga because that's his ancestral place. So this business of God being everywhere, standing there and standing here, and in this loving place, this is very, very important.
So a small note I want to,
Sure.
one is that these three poets that you're reading from, they're actually separated by centuries
Yes.
from each other.
No.
No.
They are
contemporary?
they are contemporaries.
Two of them are
Two are
yeah.
contemporary.
Two are contemporary and the other is...
6 to 8 centuries. Appar
Yes.
and Sambandar are probably
Yeah.
7th, early 7th, and Sundaramurti is 8th.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting point because this whole body of work begins sometime in the 5th century and then goes on for several centuries.
That's right.
And throughout this time, there is a very collective consciousness. You can see the invocation
Yes.
to the community, join together, sing, and Shiva remains as the figure, the inspiring divine for all of them.
Yes. So I'm going backwards
So
now.
how did that consistency happen? How was it passed on?
So this is the question of the institutionalization, but I'll say something very quickly about it. Raising temples for the Lord, that's what I'm showing now. Now, the thing that Mr. Vajpayee was pointing out was the descent, but here it is the idea is that these poets want to make an institution out of Tamil Bhakti. So they're dissenters with other things, and that other thing we can talk about in a minute. But when we were earlier talking, we were talking about the Jains and the Buddhists, who were the most important religionists in South India at that time. In fact, the great Tamil literature of the 5th century was written by Buddhists and Jains. The Shilapadiharam, the epic of the anklet with Kannaki as the heroine, was written by a Jain monk. And so upper is Martin Luther, basically. He converted originally to Jainism from Shaivism, then he came back to the fold, and then he vilifies the Jains in all of his hymns. Sambandar, who may not have been a Jain, devotes 1 out of 10 verses in each of his poems to some bad thing about the Jains, and I'll read a couple of examples
So actually, it's interesting. Are you saying that this is perhaps a major difference between the North and the Tamil Shaivas? That you mentioned a few things. One is locations and temples and institutionalization within the religious worship. And now you're actually bringing up a sociological
I want to
sort
bring
of
kings into this.
I would say problem.
Yeah.
So that actually crushes me.
I'm sure it does. It crushed me too when I discovered it. When I found, I'm so glad you said that, because as a 20th century enchanted person with this poetry, when I delved into the sociology of it, I was just aghast. I said, this is not inclusive, it's exclusive. Only those who believe in, that's why I said Martin Luther, it's a reformation, it's cleansing and purging. In fact, I don't want to go into all the details here, but those hymns are not the ones that lasted. Let me tell you that. The ones that lasted, the ones that we sing, in fact, I knew nothing about them. So that should say something about that was then, and this is now. The continuing universality of the poems is everything that everybody talked about, including the gender bending and all of that. That's
Is
there.
the animosity in the lyrics, or that's a separate thing?
No, it's entirely in the lyrics. We can get back to that, but let's not dwell on that because that's not the perennial. But I also wanted to say something. Kings were very important. If you will just look at these great temples, these monumental temples, from the earliest ones to the great temple at Tanjore, Brihadishwara, built in 1010 AD by the imperial Raja. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but these temples, these bronzes, these images, the great Nataraja, I want to now talk about the bronzes, which became the concretizations of these visions. So I want to get to vision and not talk about the sociology. So here's the one, because I would like to play a professional singer at the temple called an Oduvar, a cantor, a chanter, a singer, which is, I went to study with the Oduvars at these temples, and that's how I learned to sing them. There is one particular way of singing which is particularly beautiful, and that is called Vrittam. Vrittam is the more expanded version of singing, and that means you're not doing tala and so forth. I think it's over here somewhere, and even if I don't have the text, I can sing it. So I'll just sing it now, and then I'll get to the vision part of it. I want to kind of give a sense of the singing of the Oduvar, then I will get to the பண் சுமந்த பாடல் பரிசு படைத்து அருளும். I don't, oh yeah, here it is. I would like to read the translation first so you can hear what I'm saying. The Lord who graciously accepts our songs shares his body with the goddess. He rules the heavenly sphere of lofty fame. He bears an eye on his forehead. In Madurai, once he carried earth for hire and was beaten by the king. Girls, let us sing the golden body that bore those wounds. Sing Ammanai, let's play the game of Ammanai. This is a very rich poem. It's by a later poet, Manika Vachakar, 4 poets are seen as the great poets and became the canonized first saints of the tradition. 63 saints are counted in total, and Sundaramurti in the 8th century names all of the 63, including himself. And he says, Tillaivar Andanartham Adiyarkum Adiyen. I am the servant of the servants of Shiva. Then he names each one of them in the litany of the 63 saints. These are worshipped, and they are all of the castes, the democratization of worship, potters, women, all sorts of everything is there. But I want to talk about this particular poem. Panchumanda Padal Parishi Padaithu Arulum. Each of these lines talks about the rhyming is always in the beginning. Let me just give you this example. Pan Shumanda Padal Parishi Padaithu Arulum. Lots of alliteration. Pen Shumanda Bahattan Pemman. Vin Shumanda Kirti Viyan Mandalathu Ishan. Kan Shumanda Netrik Kadavul. Man Shumanda Kuri Kondu. Pun Shumanda. Each of these bears the weight. Pan Shumanda Badal, song with musical tunes. Pen Shumanda Bhagatan, the body which is half woman. Vin Shumanda Kirti, the heavenly, lofty fame. I'm going to sing this and you'll hear it. Kan Shumanda Netrik Kadavul. Kalimadure, Man Shumanda, he carried earth for hire. He went to an old woman who didn't have a son because the king of Madurai was conscripting people to labor. And the woman couldn't do the labor, so Shiva went as her son, and he was the laborer, and there he began doing madcap antics like a madman. The king told his men to go and lash this idiot, and when he was lashed, the linga and the king himself were lashed. They felt the lashing, and they said, oh my God, what have I done? And then he said, I will not conscript everybody and get slave labor. The last one is, in Madurai, he once carried earth for hire and was beaten by the king. Girls, this is a song sung by young girls as they're playing jacks. Let us sing the golden body that bore the wounds, Amma and I. Now just listen to the singing. Panchumanda Padal Parishi Padaithu Arulum. Panchumanda Padal Parishi Panchumanda Padal Parishi Padaithu Arulum Pen Shumanda Bhagattan Pemman Perundurayan Pen Shumanda Bhagattan Pemman Perundurayan Vin Shumanda Kirti Viyan Mandalatishan Vin Shumanda Kirti Viyan Mandalatishan Kanchumanda Netrik Kadavul Kalimadurai Manchumandu Kuli Kondu Akkoval Mottundu Punchumanda Ponmeni Padudungan Ammana I'm singing the song as Oduvar at Kapalishwara temple taught me how to sing Manika Vachakar's Panchumanda. So, Mani, would you have any more questions, or can I talk about vision?
No,
Whichever we
please,
should
go
do.
ahead. This is
All right,
beautiful.
okay. Because I know time is also important.
We've got plenty.
Okay, here's a great poem, and if we have time, I will play the Oduvar singing, which I would like to do. But if we don't, I'll at least read the poem. See the God. See him who is higher than the gods. Appar has written this poem or composed this poem, and he's talking about God, Shiva, as everything. See the God, see him who is higher than the gods. See him who is Sanskrit of the north and southern Tamil and the 4 Vedas. See him who bathes in milk and ghee. See the Lord, see him who dances holding fire in the wilderness of the burning ground. See him who blessed the hunter saint. See him who wells up as honey in the heart lotus of his lovers. See him who is the unattainable treasure. See Shiva. See him who is our treasure here in Shivapuram. One point I want to make is the hunter saint, Kannappar. The paradigm of Shaiva Bhakti, who was known already to these early saints, he was one of the great saints. He was a hunter, and he saw a linga of Shiva who was being worshipped in the forest, a natural linga, by a priest. Priest would come every day in the forest and do puja. And when the priest left, Kannappar felt a passion and love for this god. So the only thing he knew was he brought it some meat. He smeared it with blood because he's a hunter. And because he didn't have anything else to put on him, he took his saliva and smeared him all over the place. And then he worshipped him. One day, every day the priest came back and said, look at this. This is polluted. And then he made pujas and things. And then Shiva came to the priest in his dream and said, come and watch what I will show you. So Shiva looks at the priest is looking from behind a tree. Kannappar comes. The linga starts bleeding. It has two eyes, and the linga, one eye starts bleeding. Kannappar takes out one eye and gives it to Shiva because he wants Shiva to have the eye. Then Shiva starts bleeding, the other eye starts bleeding. So Kannappar, in order to replace that eye, puts his foot on the linga so that he'll know which place the eye is in. And then he takes out this other eye, plucks it out and puts it there and says, are you all right? Are you all right now? And then Shiva appears and the priest, everything is all right. Kannappar receives his eyes back and Shiva says, see, this is bhakti. This is puja. Do this. Okay? So dissent, Mr. Vajpayee, is here. This critique is here. But here's my most favorite poem of all, which is these iconic murti forms, which are being, sorry, I'm going backwards. Here. You know the famous Nataraja, right? Why isn't it going? The Nataraja form. I'm just going to leave it there. Now I'm going to read the poem. I won't read the original, although it's beautiful. I'll read the translation. Read the original, but time. Okay. Kunitta puruvamum kovvai chevvai tannil kumin chirippum. Inittamudai edutha porpadamum panitta shadayum pavalam pol meniyil paal venneerum. Inittamudai edutha porpadamum kaana petral. Manitta piravayum venduvade immanilatte. If you could see the arch of his brow, the budding smile on lips red as kovvai fruit, the cool matted hair, the milk-white ash on coral skin, and the sweet golden foot raised up in the dance, then even human birth on this wide earth would be a thing worth having. But you see, if you could see, this dance is not this cosmic dance. It's this dance that you're witnessing right there. There's the budding smile on lips, and the matted hair is cool because you can feel it. The Ganga is flowing, and you can sense the coolness of the river, and the milk-white ash, and the golden foot is sweet. It's the golden foot raised up in dance. I don't have time to read many Sanskrit poems here, but in the anthologies of Sanskrit poetry, there are fantastic poems describing Shiva's dance all the way into the 12th and 13th centuries. But none of them have this intimacy, and that is what Shaiva Bhakti is all about.
So when we chatted before, we talked about how some of the poems have such a sensuous, erotic tone, and but Shiva being such an ascetic figure.
Yes. Yes.
Is there?
Yes. Let's come back to the Jains again. That would be very good, because the thing that Appar resents about the Jains, now that he is reconverted to Shaivism, is that he said, lusting after. He says, I ran away from women and I became a monk and I carried mats. And what kind of life is that? Shiva's asceticism is a sensuous asceticism. Half his body is woman. He is woman and man. And the sensuous beauty of his body, the aesthetic, is what Appar was missing among the Jains. Now, it is not entirely fair to the Jains and the Buddhists to say they have no aesthetic, but this is Appar's biased view. That is what shocked me. But here we are. This is Ardhanarishwara in the early form, right? An earring of bright new gold glows on one ear. A coiled conch shell sways on the other. On one side, he chants the melodies of the ritual Veda. On the other, he gently smiles. Matted hair adorned with sweet cassia blossoms on one half of his head, and a woman's curls on the other, he comes. The one is the nature of his form, the other of hers, and both are the very essence of his beauty. So the asceticism is itself beautiful. The matted hair is cool and sensuous with the Ganga's presence. The female body is part of this beauty. And Uma, the goddess, is mentioned in many of the poems. And historically, she becomes much more central after the 8th century. Manika Vachakar, for him, the goddess is central. And then in later Tamil Bhakti, the goddess becomes almost everything. In the 19th century songs of Muthuswami Dikshitar, which I specialize in, I sing, Kamalam Bam Bhajare Re Manasa. He's singing in Sanskrit 8, 10, 12 centuries after Appar, in the same place where Appar sang in Thiruvarur, and he's brought out the goddess who is the greatest presence in that place, and he sings to her, and it's very harmonious with this ancient tradition because the goddess is in each of these places.
So actually a very interesting fusion I noticed in your poems. You talked about the Sanskrit of the North,
Yeah.
you talked about the Veda.
Precisely.
And I think in your book you talked about how it's called the Tamil Marai, the Tamil Veda. The Tevaram is called the Tamil Veda, and it's a canonized body of work that is celebrated and worshipped. And now, as you said, it had its influence on Dikshitar, and so the tradition carries on.
And so it carries on. The tradition carries on in a very interesting way. It's this business of being rooted in places and seeing God and goddesses and all the divine in its multiple manifestations in very specific ways. This goes back to Sangam poetry. Love could take place only in Tamil landscapes and in the Tamil language. And love between God and devotees, whether it's female or male or whatever, is like erotic love. And it happens in these landscapes that in the Sangam poetry that I was reading, Only the Thief was there. And every poem has some allusion to it. So in these poems, there are several poems where Appar talks about why. Here's a very nice poem. Was it the day you rose as the one praised by the universe, or the day that the one form became three? Was it the day you angrily quelled death, or the day you burned love to ashes with a glance? Was it the day you created heaven and earth, or the day you took the young deer and shared yourself with a beautiful goddess? Was it before or after these deeds that you took Thiruvarur for your shrine? This very place that the goddess Kamalamba lives in and that Appar was celebrating. Let me just read another poem, which is very much like a Sangam poem. The temple of the god who carries a dead man's bones, the lord of Kailasa hill and Kanapper, the trident holder, bull rider who shares his body with the goddess, is Thiruvayyar, where the red-legged little egret ruffles its feathers with its sharp bill to shake them dry of the waters cold and looks for prey in the fresh waters of a grove flowing with honey. Now you remember that earlier poem where the heron was standing and looking for prey? Sambandar knows that poem, but he's transformed it into a Shiva poem because this is the place which I love because this is Shiva's place. And one more, this is my favorite. The king of the Himalayan gods, the Lord whom devotees praise in every age of the universe, the pure one who destroys sin for those who worship him in love, dwells in the shrine of Annamalai, the hill of Annamalai, on whose slopes the herdsman looks for a lost buffalo whose bellow he hears, and when he plays his flute, the whole herd gathers around. You can hear the allegory, right, of the herd. It's sort of like the shepherd and his flock. But what is beautiful is that this is a hill landscape, and each of these landscapes are one of the 5 landscapes of the Tamil Sangam poetry. The hill, now temples abound everywhere, but the natural landscape of Annamalai, the hill is worshipped as much as Ramana Maharishi's ashram is there at the foot of that hill. And that hill is the sacred place. It's not just Shiva, and Shiva is that
So
hill.
the legends that you've been referring to, are they in a Purana? Can you just tell the audience a
Yes.
couple of,
The very interesting thing is that there are stories and legends which are all known orally by the saints' time, in the time that they are writing these poems, but not all of them are fleshed out. In the 12th century, with the imperial Choras, Sheikh Kirar became became the author of the great Lives of the Saints, the Periya Puranam, the great Purana, where all the Puranic, Sanskrit Puranic stories of Shiva, of course, they are already incorporated into this poetry, but more important are the local stories of the saints, and that combination is told by Sheikh Kirar as the litany of allusion to each of the poems is quoted. So you can follow the entire 796 hymns of the Tevaram through Sheikh Kirar's Periya Puranam as a journey through each of the sacred places and through the lives of the poets. This 12th century poem was written with the order of the Chora king, and it was processionally taken on an elephant. The book was taken on an elephant, and this is how it has lasted, is that people know the Periya Puranam by heart, and they know all the stories of all the saints, and then they sing the Tevaram. The Tevaram itself, that is the hymns of the first three saints that I have translated here, became institutionalized by these Oduvar singers in the temples who were appointed by the kings and local magnates to sing the poems, and they are official singers, and they have to be sung 5 times a day at every worship. So when the puja is over, they are sung. In every procession, the Veda is at the front of the procession. This is at the end of the procession. And the Sri Vaishnavas also do the same thing, except it's the reverse. The singers, the Tamil singers are at the front and the others are behind. There are all kinds of discussions about the priority and the anteriority of all this. But more important, what is important is that it is simultaneous. And I'll tell you my experience. I was 7 months pregnant. I was holding this old, large cassette tape recorder, and I wanted to tape both the Vedas and the Oduvars in this procession. And my mother was helping me. She was holding my bag. And I said to our mother, I said, Amma, will you go forward with the tape recorder and tape the Vedas and then come back to me? Then she came back while I was listening to the Oduvars, and I did tape a big segment there. But that made me think, I cannot simultaneously do this, but Shiva and the poets and the singers can. They are doing the Veda and the Tamil songs at precisely the same time. And there's no cacophony, only harmony. This was brought home
on that
to me.
note, thank you so much. We have like about 6 minutes for any questions for Indira. Questions or comments, please?
Yes. Yes.
I think it's working, sir.
The volunteer should just do it for him. You want to take mine?
I think it's working.
We'll give yours, you're right. Yes, sir.
I would thank you in the beginning and congratulate you.
Get closer. Just
Yes.
hold it. Yeah.
Congratulate you for your very excellent presentation. I was wondering whether the renderings you gave in your mellifluous voice, those verses are also a part of A.K. Ramanujan's Tamil Shaiva poetry, or your fresh translation these, and then you could perhaps think of anthologizing another Shaiva poetry. Because, you know, I have seen, you get my point, I have thoroughly read my friend, late friend, A.K. Ramanujan's
Yes.
Tamil Shaiva poetry. I was wondering the renderings you gave,
Yes, I understood the question.
whether they are out of that selection or you are making fresh translations which could then be put into another anthology, or is it already an anthology?
The anthology, I'll answer your question, sir. Thank you very much for this. A.K. Ramanujan translated the Kannada Veera Shaiva Vachanas of Basava and so on. He did not translate Tamil Shaiva poetry. He translated Tamil Vaishnava poetry, Nammarvar. Arundhati is beautiful. Nam ivan avan ivan adu idu udu edu amavai ayavai, angavai eengivai. That poem was translated by Ramanujan. But what I translated, I mentioned at the beginning that I did this 30 years ago. This is the 30th anniversary. Princeton published it in 1989. Motilal Banarasi Das published it in 1991. It's still in print. People from all over the world, Tamil Shaivas, write to me and ask me about this, the tapes that I made of the Oduvars, and I send them to them because they want their children who don't speak any Tamil and they live in Malaysia, USA, and places like that. They want them to hear and know their heritage. So this book was the first complete, no, it's not complete, but it is 279 selections out of 796 poems. There is now a complete online translation, but not a poetic translation, just a literal one on the French Institute of Pondicherry website. But Poems to Shiva is in print. I was very disappointed to see that they could not get it from Motilal Banarsi Das to display here, but it is available on Amazon and everything. But these were the first translations. They weren't the very first. There were about 25 selections made by Kingsbury and Phillips in 1935 or something. And then after that, these 279 poems I translated were the very first ones. I wanted to teach my American students Tamil Shaiva poetry, and I could not because there was no translation available. That's the answer.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am, for such a graphic presentation about Tamil Shaiva poetry. I was not introduced to this scene of poetry until now, and after being introduced to North Indian poetry by Vajpayee sir, and I was also introduced to the Eastern Indian scene of poetic culture. Ma'am, my question is that the Eastern and Northern Indian scene and the poets, they are very frank toward the God they're addressing. And they think of it as a friend, they criticize the God. But while reading, while listening to you, I see that the poets down the south, they are very obliged, and they are focusing on the erotic part or the sensuous part or the emotional part while addressing the gods. So can you please give me the precise reason behind this?
It's a very good question. It's not entirely true. The three poets themselves, these are the earliest poets. There were many poets afterwards too in the tradition. But I worked on the earliest ones because they are the most famous, they are the canonized saints. But what is interesting is that Sundaramurti, the Lord's comrade, his life in itself is a joke almost, because he not only has one wife, he has one is a dancer in the temple at Thiruvarur, Paravai Nachiyar, he's shown in that image with her standing next to him. But he makes Shiva his go-between. He says, I want that dancing girl, go. Bring her to me. And Shiva says, so in fact in one song somebody says, Paravaikku Thudu Ponai, you went as a go-between to Paravai Nachiyar, what kind of a god are you? And then Sundaramurti is also very, not only sensual, but very earthy and earthly. He says, well, I want gold and silk and a flashing sword, and just a few thousand gold coins will do, Shiva. Please send them to me and make sure that you pay the guy who comes from the next village to bring them in a bullock cart because I don't have the money for it. And one day he says, I got about 30 bags of rice from this merchant over there. Can you send somebody to cook it for me, please? So Sundaramurti. And the next thing that he did was, he sent Shiva, says, one wife isn't enough, I want one more. I'm in love with Shangili Nachiyar. So go to Shangili and I'll stay with her, and don't tell Paravai I'm staying with her. But of course Paravai knows, and Paravai has a quarrel with Sundarar. So Sundarar says, go to her and please reconcile us, please, like the Sakhi in Jayadev, she has to to go and reconcile. So he goes and reconciles her, and then everybody lives happily. But meanwhile, Sundara is struck with blindness, because this is just to show how stupid he has been. And then Shiva, of course, after he repents, but meanwhile he starts chiding his god. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, which is not at all polite. Okay?
I just want to add to that, the very fact that we decided to give this session the title, "O Madman," is in fact to suggest the kind of irreverence that was possible, the way in which God here could be addressed. But Indira, I'd like to actually request you to conclude with some music. Could we hear some more?
Sure.
Yes?
I'd rather have them sing, because I don't really sing these songs anymore. So we'll play the, I have the computer thing here, but I'd have to go and look at it. So I'll just... sorry. I don't know what to do. Can someone come and help me? Just end of the slideshow. Just end the slideshow and just do the tape. Take the mic with me. Let me take the mic with me. Now, here is the, the first tape is the one that I made, running to the end of the procession. The thing that's important about it is, today the tradition has almost died down because the temples were not supporting the singing tradition, not today, in the 70s. It has been revived today because there is a great sense of revival of this whole singing tradition, that there's a precious heritage. But I was the one, I had to go around taping them because there was a danger of them, more or less, people not taking up the profession at all. It was a hereditary profession, and people were going into other businesses and things like that. This is why I did that. Now, the sequence will be this. First, I will play a very short 1.5-minute clip from the procession in 1978 that I recorded at Mylapore at the Shiva temple. And what you must notice is the hand cymbals, the tal, gartal, that is being used. And I didn't want the modern kind of performance with mridangam and violin and accompaniment, because the purity of voice is important. These were ancient cassette tapes from 30 years ago, so the recording is very bad. My apologies for that. But the next one I will do is the beautiful singing of the hymn, See the God, See Him Who Is at the North. And I'll read it first and then I'll play it. Those will be the two. Yeah? So the first one is very short. Do I just click on it and it'll start? Yes. Yeah, I will double click. Am I doing it? I don't know. What am I clicking? Please come and click it. Just click it for me. Yeah. No, this third one. Yeah. And loud, play it very loud, very loud. Two Oduvars are singing. It's in the procession, so the sound is not very good. Stop. Thank you. Now I'm going to the next one. Can you click it for me? This is a copy of a copy, so it's not very good. But let me read the poem. I have to find it here. It's somewhere there, but I can easily find it. It's very early in the book. Let me just find it as soon as it's right at the beginning. Yeah. See the God. I have to say it in Tamil. See the God, see him who is higher than the God, see him who is Sanskrit of the north and southern Tamil and the four Vedas, the one that I read earlier. Vanavan Khan, Vanavarkum Melanan Khan, Vadamuriyum Ten Tamirum Maraigal Nangum Anavan Khan, Anaindum Adinan Khan, Ayyan Khan, Kayil Analendi Adinan Khan, Kanagatil Adinan Khan, Kanavanuku Arul Seidan Khan, Karuduvar Idayathu Kamalathu Tenavan Khan. I'm just remembering it, so I don't remember the next one. Karuduvar Idayathu Kamalathu Tenavan Khan. சென்று அடையா செல்வந்தான் கான் சிவனவன் கான் சிவபுரத்து எம் செல்வந்தானே. So now I'll play a little bit of how he sings it. It's long drawn out and very beautiful. Just click on it. I think my fingers don't work because
வானவன் கான் வானவர்க்கும் மேலானான் கான்.
see there's a double quality, sorry about that.
வடமொழியும் தென் தமிழும் மறைகள் நான்கும் காணவன் வடமொழியும் தென் தமிழும் மறைகள் நான்கும் ஆனவன் ஆன் ஐந்தும் ஆடினான் வடமொழியும் தென் தமிழும் மறைகள் நான்கும் ஆனவன் ஆனைந்தும் ஆடினால் காள் ஐயல் கையில் அனல் ஏந்தியாடும் காணவன் காணவனுக்கு அருள் செய்தால் கருதுவார் இதயத்து கமலத்து ஊர்ம் தேனவல் காள்
He who wells up in the heart notices his valleys.
கருதுவார் இதயத்து கமலத்து ஊரும் தேனவன் சென்று அடைய செல்வன் தாள் சிவன் அவன் சிவபுரத்தையும் செல்வன் தானே சென்று அடையா செல்வன் தான்
Thank you, Indira. Thank you, Mani. It's really not often that one has a session of this kind of richness, where there's someone capable of talking about a tradition, reading the poems in the original, in translation, and then singing them as well. This is really a treat. Thank you so much.
You also need a wonderful interlocutor, and Mani Rao, she's a poet. She knew what questions to ask. She knew exactly what was the right thing to do. Thank you so much, Mani.
We're going to hear more from Mani and many other poets later this afternoon. We now move on to the last session before lunch.
Thank you very much once again, Dr. Indira Vishwanathan Peterson, for all the enlightenment she added to the session. And thank you, Mani, for making the conversation so gripping and informative. With that, we move on to the next session, which is equally interesting and insightful. And here we will follow someone to a very strange and very special place. Shabnam Veermani is a filmmaker, singer, and artist in residence at the Shristi Institute of Art, Design and Technology in Bangalore. Stung by the religious riots of Gujarat in 2002, she initiated the Kabir Project, journey in quest of the 15th century mystic Kabir, exploring how his poetry intersects with ideas of identity, religion, nationalism, impermanence, and orality. Inspired by the spirit of Bhakti, Sufi, and Baul oral traditions. The Kabir project team has now been engaged for over 15 years in curating and re-expressing the power of this poetry through documentary films, music CDs, books, urban festivals, rural yatras, school workshops, and a web archive called Ajab Shahar. Shabnam is currently working on 2 upcoming books on Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai and Kabir. So let's follow Shabnam Veermani and take a tour of the Ajab Shahar.